Hey y'all, thanks for coming back. Have another video here for you all, and we're gonna go through another gin and juice can with another flavor. And um, I had some time to create a texture and take some photos of another flavor. So I'm gonna walk you guys through. I'm gonna flash up the final image so that you guys can see that also. So this is the final image. Um, I'm not gonna use the software in this video, but to do the finalization of the image, I actually ran it through uh, Camera Raw. You can find it in Adobe Bridge or through Photoshop, where you can do some final adjustments to your image. I rendered it out as a TIFF 16-bit and then process it in Adobe Camera Raw. So, okay, so going back to the 3D, this is the scene, this is the stage that I set up for the shot. So I'm gonna make this video as just a walkthrough, um, because there's another portion that I really want to go into depth about when it comes to this particle system that I made. As you can see right here, this is actually geometry nodes, and I've walked you all through the process of doing this in the past. But I have a different method also that I've learned to deal with particles and how to produce them in a different fashion. So I'm gonna make a more in-depth video about that in another time. So anyway, okay, so let's talk about this shot real quick. So I've been doing some experimenting with particles and just doing exercises, kind of like still lifes for product shots, and then I also play with particles a lot. And so I just wanted to take the both and put them together and start using some particles in my shots and seeing how I can incorporate particles. So just real quick, let's go over the lighting and then I'll kind of just give an overview on the particles. So the shot itself has two lights. I'll turn them on and off, actually three lights. So we actually have three lights in the scene. As the background is the particle system that's been converted to geometry nodes. I'm using a alembic mesh, and the material itself for these particles is a has transmission to it. So it's a purple color to relate to the passion fruit color, and then the transmission is turned all the way up, and then there's just no roughness at all because there's just so many of them, and that light will bounce all through it. So I didn't have to add any roughness so that I could see the color better. And so what I did was I added a light below this whole particle system, and that light's being pushed through and being refracted through these particles. So it's giving this really nice look through the particles, this glow look. I thought of this method just via scrolling through Instagram and seeing how photographers shoot a lot of different shots of things. And I saw this one photographer where they would stack up glass and they would put different layers of things, and then they would put a light behind to shoot through. And so they're shooting through the layers of glass and then lights pushing up through the translucent objects. And so it's kind of like the video I did with the shades when dealing with transparent materials. Sometimes it's better to put the light source actually in the shot behind, directly in front of the camera. And so you're pushing light through the surface so that you can actually see the translucency or transparency of the surface. So that's the same approach here. Okay, so now another light, let's move on, is let's come back to that light. Well, this is just a kicker light for the right side of the can. So that's the reason for this light. So if I turn this light back off and we turn on the key light, I was just having a little bit too much shadow on this right side. And so I just wanted to add a kicker light. So this is my key light. This is what I started with. It's a long light, as you can see here. It's casting a long light, and that's because I wanted to make sure that this reflection comes all the way from the top to the bottom of the object. So that's the reasoning. And then I also wanted to ensure that I get highlights on all of these particles. So as you can see a speck highlight going across these particles. And then, of course, you got shadow casting, and we can see the glow of the surface from the light coming behind. And then lastly, I added a kicker light just to give this side of the can some illumination. And it just helps to display the shape of the can more too, which I like. So that's the shot for this. And then, so let's get into some other details such as the lighting. I mean, not the lighting, the objects. So let's talk about the set itself. So again, this is the particles. I'm going to talk about the can. I'm going to turn off these particles for now because the scene is very slow. So let's turn off the particles for now. So the can itself, the way I set up this can, it's actually, I'm using another Blender add-on. It's for droplets. And basically this add-on just makes it so that you can create droplets fairly fast, right? And it comes on as a modifier, and you get all these different options to create droplets. You can even animate the droplets too. I haven't gotten to that point where I know how to do that, but it's very fast, and I love this add-on. This was actually one of the first add-ons I bought to work with droplets on cans. So I love this add-on. So there's actually a lot of droplets, and it's pretty heavy, but droplets, there can be a lot, and you get the option of big ones, medium and small ones. So that's the can. The can itself, the model's fairly simple. It was pieced together just with two parts. So I found the top part of a can somewhere, and then the bottom part I modeled out myself, which is, going from here to the base and underneath. That's all modeled by myself. But the top, I had an existing model of this portion, and I just snagged that to reuse. So again, I'm at a point in my long journey of 3D where I try not to model a lot these days. There's so many models out there that you can find for free or pay a little bit of money, and you can piecemeal things together instead of trying to be this expert modeler, and model things all the way out. I don't believe in that concept unless you want to be a modeler at the end of the day and that's all you want to do. Then I get that. But my goal is to build shots. That's what I like doing. I like doing look development, building shots, and doing that part of production. So let's look at, okay, so, and then one more thing I wanted to point out, as you guys can see here, these two surfaces, these are just bounce cards. So with the lighting that I have in the scene, I just want to ensure that I get a little bit of ambient light bouncing back into the shot so that there's not a lot of blacks happening, meaning that I have really deep shadows. So let me turn these particles back on, and I'll just open up the geometry node editor to show you all. Excuse me. Okay, so looking at the geometry node editor, this is the setup for it. So again, I ran a particle system. I exported it out as a limbic mesh and then imported it into the scene. And then this is what I do from there. Once it comes in, is I set up the geometry nodes. So the first node that I set up is a points to vertices. So I created a points to vertices because I needed to convert the mesh first, and then from there I needed to create it, go points, mesh to points node, so that I can actually have a mesh. And then after that, I also created an instance on points, and what this does, it allows you to use actual objects as references to make as your particles. So like, let's say if I wanted to make all of these particles boxes, I can use this instance on points to create boxes as my particles, and I would put in my collection instance into here. So right, what you see in this collection info that's being plugged in, which is the node you need to use for your objects, and plug it into this instance input, you would take your collection instance, drag it over here and plug it in. And then now you have whatever object is in that collection instance as your particle that's being propagated throughout your scene. This node here is a random value node, and all it's doing is randomizing the rotation. Initially, I was going to use more irregular objects and not perfect spheres. And so I wanted to randomize the rotation. I just left that node there because I was doing some look development initially. And then I have another random value node for my scale. So the scale of all of these dots, bubbles, whatever you want to call them, the scale has been randomized. So just to create more variation into the shot. And I love how it came out. So that's the reason for that. So this is a simple setup. I'm not an expert when it comes to geometry nodes. This was just practiced and practiced and practiced. So I just memorize it now. And then this is just the material. So if this is how you get materials into geometry nodes. So you have to do a set material. And then from there, you have the material that you're referencing here. And that's it. So that's the geometry nodes. Now I'm going to switch over to the particle scene, and I'm just going to show you guys that real quick. I'm not going to walk through everything of how I was able to set it up because I need to go back and review it. It was a lot of R&D to figure it out. But we'll switch over to that scene too, and I'll show you guys that. Okay, so this is the simulation scene that I created for the particles. So now let me backtrack a little bit just to explain what's happening here. So I love sketchy visuals. I don't know if you guys have ever watched Sketchy Visuals' channel. He's a Cinema 4D Octane guy, but he does some amazing videos. And one of the things that he does and talks about is X particles. It's a particle system that's for Cinema 4D. If you ask me, it's probably way better than what we get here in Blender. But you know, the way I'd like to learn is I'll go off and watch videos that interest me and things that I want to do. And it doesn't matter what software they're using. What I'll do is I'll watch what they're doing, and then I'll come back to my software and I'll try to figure it out how to produce the same thing in Blender, right? And I think a lot of Blender people do that too. You know, they just figure it out in Blender after watching something in 3ds Max, Cinema 4D, Maya, whatever software you want to call it, right? And so Sketchy Visuals talks about flip fluids and X particles. And so there's a specific video where he's doing simulations and he's using flip fluids for his particles. And so I had the thought, because I was reading into the Blender documentation, well, Blender uses flip fluids also. So is it possible for me to take a fluid simulation and convert that to particles, right? Because the benefit of that is I'm getting fluid-like particles versus, you know, when you start off with default particles in Blender, you have to create everything from scratch. And so my thought was, well, I can take advantage of this fluid simulations to get something more fluid to create, right? It flows like fluid. And so what's happening here is I have a container that you can see right here, right? So this is the container. And if you guys are familiar with fluids, you have fluids and volumes and smoke simulations. You have to put them in what you call containers, or there's another term. But anyway, I have this container to have my simulation in, right? And the simulation runs inside this container, and I'm generating a volumetric surface from the get-go. So it's not like I'm pouring fluid in. There's already a surface that's in there. And then what I have inside that surface too is turbulence happening. So I have a turbulence that's happening to simulate this too. And it's pushing the fluid everywhere, or water, if you want to call it that. So if we look at it from a top-down view, the turbulence is turning the fluid everywhere. So that's what's happening. So it's basically just a simple body of fluid inside of the container, right? And you can see the height of it, right? It starts right here. This is where it starts. So this is the body of fluid right here. And then the turbulence is just what's causing it to disrupt everywhere. So it's disrupting it and it's just throwing the fluid everywhere, right? And then what I also did in this scene too, so backing up a little bit. So in this scene, I initially created this a couple months ago, not a couple months, probably 2 months ago. But I initially created just like I like playing around with this stuff all the time. I'm always trying to figure out new things, and so this is one of the things that I figured out, you know. And once I had figured it out, you know, I save it and I keep it in the library. And so when I was working on this can again, I wanted to reuse this element. And so now what I did was I brought the can in and then I created a box at the same size. And then I created a, there's a word for it, but it's a effector. I think that's what it's called. And so what the effector does is it says that, hey, there's an object here. Fluid cannot go past this object, basically. And so that's what I did in the scene too, so that I had a section for the can and the fluids will flow around the can. So that's the simulation. It's very cool. And from here, I was able to export this out as an Alembic mesh. So now, you know, this is as far as I could take it, right? And I was like, okay, well, how can I convert this so that I can use the simulation as particles, right? And so now I remember I have Alembic export options. So I exported this out as an Alembic mesh, and then I brought it into my new scene. And as you all saw in the first scene, you know, we had the gin and juice scene, right? And so that's how I was able to get that look with my particles. So I can create a whole animation if I wanted with that gin and juice scene, because that's how these particles are flowing. Now that scene is very heavy because I've converted it to a geometry node along with collection instances. So it's instancing actual meshes and it's making the scene very heavy. That's what was slowing down the scene. So, and as you can see, like here's another experiment where, oh, this one's not referencing the Alembic mesh. I don't think these will work because I deleted the limbics. But these were other experiments I was doing. I was just creating shots from the Alembic meshes, but they're not linked right now because I deleted the Alembic mesh. So that's how I was able to create this whole look. So I'll go back to the gin and juice scene real quick, and then we'll stop the video from there. Okay, so we're back in the gin and juice scene. And as I said, we have, this is the Alembic export. And so let me go to a top view. And so as you can see, there's a space for the can. And let me back up on the frames to where it starts. So like this is where the frame starts. And I can just kind of cycle through my frames. And as you can see, it's the same fluid that's happening. So I'll just go by tens. So 10, 20, 32. And it gets more crazy as it goes. 64. 128. Just jumping through, showing you guys the simulation. So this is the export of the whole simulation that I created. I could play it faster. Matter of fact, I'll do this. I'll disconnect the collection instance. So I'll run this like so. Now it should play faster. Yep, there we go. So this is the whole sim, right? This is the fluid mesh. Now I have it exported as an Alembic mesh, and they're basically particles that I can use now. And then again, the fluids are moving around the can. As you can see, there's some that are going through a little bit, but that's okay because I'm not using those frames. But pretty cool thing. And it's very like organic. That's what I really love about this. It's very organic, moving the fluid around. So I think one thing that I want to figure out, as if you can see, is the lifetime of some of these fluids. Like what I noticed in Cinema 4D with X particles, you don't see these particles just disappearing. And that's what I'm seeing that's happening here. And so I would like to try to figure out how I could fix the lifetime of some of these elements so that they're not so abrupt in terms of them just disappearing. Because then they would feel way more organic. Because I want to do some more animations with this method. So again, I'll walk you guys more in detail. I want to do another video of like actually creating this whole simulation. I just wanted to walk you guys through the shot and show you kind of the behind the scenes of how I created the shot real quick. So this video is just more of a walkthrough, nothing specific. I don't want to get into details on the particle sim, but I'm going to make another video where I will walk you guys through how I can accomplish this. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it gave you guys some ideas. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. I appreciate you guys coming through. Peace.